Sadler. I am the director of the Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation, and I'm grateful to be that you are here with us this evening, grateful to be with you this evening, and thrilled to death to be able to have this program that we have working tonight. I want to welcome each of you to the Dangerous Dialogues series. Dangerous Dialogues are conversations that we think that the church needs to have, but isn't having. It's not having these dangerous dialogues sometimes because the issues are too hot to deal with. And other times we're not having these conversations because we don't know that we need to have them. We don't know what is going on in the larger church world because we need to have these conversations to hear about things. And I think that the conversation tonight falls into that latter category. I know that there's some wonderful work that's being done in the Presbyterian USA's Office for Public Witness. And I know that there is some great things that we might all be able to participate in as we think about the way that the reign of God is borne witness to by this office in Washington, D.C. Our guest tonight is incredibly wonderful. I will introduce him to you in just a second. But some of the things, I just want to let you know a little bit more about the series. Some of the things that we talked about in this series are the need to have dangerous dialogues as the church, why the church needs to address issues of race, how we can be involved in dealing with sex trafficking, what the church thinks about human sexuality. And next month, on the 10th of December, we'll have a conversation that focuses on what the church can do to be a witness in the midst of the Israel-Palestine conflict. So hopefully these are conversations that you will join, participate in, learn from, and that will shape the ministry that you engage in on a regular basis. All of that said, again, I'm thrilled to death to introduce to you the Reverend Jimmie Hawkins tonight. So many of you already know Jimmie. You've worked with him in many capacities. Jimmie is a native of Henderson, North Carolina. So he's a North Carolina boy originally, even though he has gone on to different places. He pastored Grace Presbyterian Church for a few years, Covenant Presbyterian Church in Durham, North Carolina for 20 years. That's a pretty long thing for a young guy like you, Jimmie. And now he's decided to take over as the director of the Office for Public Witness in Washington, D.C. Jimmie Hawkins, I've gotten to know him not just through the work with the Presbyterian Church, but have we been arrested together, Jimmie?
I was arrested right before you, but I think we've been in jail together.
Jail together. We've been on the front lines together. Jimmie is one of the founders of the Moral Monday movement here in North Carolina. He and Reverend William Barber were arrested on the 29th of May, 2013, and helped to start a new movement at that moment. Jimmie is always involved in issues that deal with social justice, making the world better, helping the world to reflect what it is that God calls it to be. So I'm proud to know Jimmie, proud to follow in his footsteps and try to work with him as he continues to bear witness to the reign of God on earth. Tonight, we're going to hear from Jimmie, and I want him to talk about the work of the office. We're going to give him about 20 minutes to talk. After that, I'm going to open up the conversation with a few questions to Jimmie. And then during that period in time, I invite you to add your questions into the chat so that we can begin to have those questions. If we're a relatively small number, I might just ask you to unmute yourself and ask the questions yourself. But we want this to be a good dialogue, a healthy back and forth where we can begin to learn about what's going on. If we are successful at the end of the night, not only will we know what the Office for Public Witness does, but how we can be involved in forwarding the work of the church with Jimmie. Thank you all so much. And Jimmie, I want to turn it over to you now, my brother. God bless you.
Thank you. And thank you for the great.
Before we do anything else, please forgive me. We did not pray. Let's look to the Lord. Holy One, it's once again that we come before you with thanksgiving in our hearts. We are grateful for this occasion that brings us here tonight. We are thankful for your servant, Jimmie Hawkins, and for the way that he has borne witness to your reign in the midst of this world. Lord, right now, as we come together, we ask for a fresh anointing of your Spirit. May your Spirit fall on Jimmie that he might teach us about how we can continue to serve your will in the politics of this world. And may your Spirit fall on each and every one who's gathered, that we may hear with ears that are eager to learn, that our hearts would be open to be challenged, and that we may go forward with hands and feet ready to work for kingdom building activity. Lord, you are great, you are gracious, and we, your people, are thankful to you always. Use us for your purposes. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Rodney, for that very gracious invitation. It's quite an honor for me to speak with you all tonight. And again, I want to emphasize that I want to speak with you because I'm going to talk, as Rodney said, about 15, 20 minutes. And then, we're really just opening up the Q&A to engage one another. I would imagine that many of you are aware of the work of the Office of Public Witness, but I'm going to do just kind of a little introductory to the work of the office. And it's quite an honor to be here on this platform for dangerous dialogues because, we really need to have these conversations throughout the church. And I will say this, I am very excited about the work of the Presbyterian Church. And I really think that we are getting our second wind right now as a denomination. The last couple of decades have been so embroiled with inner conflict and worrying about whether people are going to leave the church. And we've gotten down to 1.3 million members, which is the smallest the denomination has been in recent history. But I also think that we are at our healthiest right now, and there is a consensus in the life of the church to have greater focus on justice. And really, it's just the last General Assembly we had before the last one, when we had in St. Louis, it was such a wonderful General Assembly. Every General Assembly, the staff is so anxious. What's going to come up? What are the tension points? But there was a general consensus that this was one of the best General Assemblies that we've had in quite a while, primarily because of the focus on justice. I'm so honored to be a part of Union Presbyterian Seminary. I'm a graduate, actually, of the Presbyterian School of Christian Education back in '86. And so that made me an alum of the seminary as well after Federation. But I'm really just so pleased with the work that's being done on both campuses, but especially the work on the Charlotte campus. I think it really added a new dimension that few seminaries have around the country, where you're offering people an opportunity to seek ordination, to seek an MDiv degree at their own pace, do it on the weekends while they can still maintain family and work. And I think it's just a wonderful ministry. And Richard and I were talking beforehand about the advantages and disadvantages of being virtual. But I do think it's going to extend the ministry of the seminary in ways that none of us could have anticipated. I'm going to share my screen with you and want to go through a PowerPoint that I have. And can everyone see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let me get this to expand. All right. All right. Feel free at any time if you have a question on something. I know Rodney said we would keep the questions to the end, but write them down because, again, we want to talk to you about ways in which we can partner with you through the seminary and through your own individual ministries. So we're the Office of Public Witness. Very quickly, how many of you are very, very familiar with the Office of Public Witness? Just kind of give me a shout out. Good, good. So I see most of you are. So we're at the Office of Public Witness, and we have an unusual name. We call ourselves OPW, Office of Public Witness. We used to be the Washington office. We have been in existence for over 71 years in Washington, D.C., have a wonderful location. We're right across the street from the from Capitol Hill. Right next door is the Supreme Court. So I can look out my window, see the Supreme Court, walk out my front door, and to my right are the Senate office buildings. To my left, 2 blocks down, are the House of Representatives, their offices. And again, across the street is Capitol Hill. So we are right in the heart of everything in the United Methodist Building. All right. So we have 4 employees, 4 staff. And on the left, you see with the black scarf is Catherine Gordon. Catherine does international work. So if you were to call me in the office, you want to know something about Israel, Palestine, you want to talk about South Sudan, you want to talk about anything that's going on in the world, but it's international, I would refer you to Catherine. She's our longest employee. She's been there, I think, around 16 years or so. Very engaged in the work. Most of her work goes through the State Department. Obviously, for the last 4 years, it's been a dry spell. Not a lot of access. Couple of meetings were held, but not very productive. But that's the exception to the rule. Normally, we have a lot of access to the State Department, trying to influence foreign policy. And Aaron and I were talking beforehand, and we don't do lobbying. We are advocates. And the difference basically is that it's from a spiritual component. The office of public witness, we're witnesses to Christ in the public arena. So we deal with public policy, the positions of the church. We can only speak to things that the church has spoken on. But I always jokingly say to Presbyterians, what has the Presbyterian Church not spoken on? So we're pretty well covered on any social policy issue, any social justice issue, capital punishment, healthcare, living wage, foreign policy. We have statements on them. So we follow the dictates of the General Assembly, but we're pretty safe in being able to approach almost any issue, even the issue of drones. We have written a statement on drones, and I referred it to one of my colleagues with the Episcopalian Church today. She wanted to see what we had written. And so Catherine does international. Right beside Catherine with the gray sweater on is Annette Greer, who's our office manager. She maintains my travel schedule, all the administrative duties of the office. Beside her with the black sweater on is Christian Brooks. Christian is a graduate of Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. Catherine graduated from Union in Richmond, or from that campus. All of us, for the first time in a long time, are seminary grads. And Christian does domestic. So you were to call to the office and you wanted to talk about voting rights, you want to talk about the election, you want to talk about the things that we're doing to try to promote a peaceful transfer of power, you would talk with Christian. And I serve as the director. Now, we are part of your national staff out of Louisville, but we're the only two offices that are not located in Louisville, along with the UN office. And you see the staff on the right. There's Ryan Smith, who serves as the director. Ivy's a contractor right now, working on a yearly contract. And in the green sweater, we have Sue Ream, who is a representative for the UN. And so we are almost, I would dare say, we're twin agencies. Even though we're separate offices, we do a lot of the same work. And the only difference, if you were to call the office and ask about an international issue, but it related to the UN, then we would refer you to the UN office. They have access to the UN. They sit on some of the subcommittees. And so we, as in the Presbyterian Church, are pretty uniquely equipped. Now, a lot of our sister denominations have offices that are very similar, but I think we've been in this thing for as long as anyone else has. And again, we have 2 deployed officers, but we do report to Louisville. We're under PMA, which is Presbyterian Mission Agency, and under that is Compassion, Peace, and Justice. So we're under Compassion, Peace, and Justice. This is really a piece that I want you to, if you don't leave with anything else from today, I want you to be aware that we do have fellows and seminarians. We offer supervised field education to seminarians, and we've had quite a few seminarians over the years who have done either a year or a summer with us. And please don't forget that if you have someone in the seminary who's interested in public policy, who wants to get engaged with the work of the church along justice, who just wants to see the work of the church. And when they come in, it's not just grunt work. We get them heavily engaged. They write alerts for us. They do research. They meet with members of Congress along with us. And they get to pick whether they want to focus on domestic issues or on international issues. We also have fellows who are there for a year. We also have YAVs who stay with us for a year. Obviously everything has changed with Zoom, and so I put their Zoom pictures up. We had 5 interns, what we call them fellows, last summer, who were all, for the first time, they were all remote workers. And so we're making this work, and we won't have any fellows for this coming summer because we have a hiring freeze, but we can still do supervised field education with seminarians. So please remember that long term. If you're ever engaged with a student who is looking for a summer placement, to consider us. And that's just my little plug for supervised field education. I wanted to really burn that into your psyche. So advocacy, we do advocacy. Again, the difference between advocacy and lobbying is that we are doing it from a spiritual perspective, but the reality is, and we don't have to register as a lobbyist, but the biggest connection is legislation. We both want to influence legislation. So part of our work is to work directly with legislators, trying to influence them in the direction of the policy positions of the Presbyterian Church. If you read any of them, they all look very progressive. We're in support of reproductive rights. We're against capital punishment. We're against for-profit prisons. We are for a living wage. We're for universal health care. So there's not a position that I've been asked this question. I had to defend the public policy positions of the denomination. Have I ever come across a position that I was uncomfortable with? And I have not. I'm really very pleased with the direction of the church. And we have papers that we have written, documents that we have produced since the 1950s. So we are uniquely positioned in that. Not only does the church take positions, but it also defends those positions through documents. And so oftentimes I will be asked by my colleagues from other denominations, have you written anything on this? Have you written anything on that? And I'm going to show you where to go to find those. But yes, we have statements on each. Now, I pulled this from Penn State. This is from their educational equity statement that I really like, where it talks about what is social justice advocacy. And it defines social justice advocacy as organized efforts at influencing public attitudes, policies, and laws for a more socially just society, vision of human rights, socioeconomic inequities, social rights, as well as racial identity and experiences of oppression. And this last word is what caught me, that I had not seen on any other secular statement. Also, issues of spirituality. Everything that we do is from a spiritual point of view. Everything influence that we try to have is based upon the teachings of Christ. We really are trying to fulfill the mandate that Jesus calls us to be people of justice, that we serve a God of justice, that one of the two main attributes that we in the Reformed faith say is God of love and God is God of justice. And we really believe strongly you can't do one without the other. So we do not believe that you can be a Christian and not be engaged in the world, especially in areas of injustice where we don't try to transform the world. We try to transform the world into a likeness of the kingdom of God. So advocacy, simply stated, is speaking up and standing with. We don't speak on behalf of people, we speak with people. A large part of my work in direct advocacy is dealing with members of Congress. Right now, there are 26 Presbyterians in Congress. Most of them are Republican, and the number dropped with the 114th Congress, 115th Congress. They had 31, we had 31. So the 116th Congress, we dropped down to 26. I think there are about 5 Democrats and the rest are Republicans, pretty moderate Republicans. We don't have a lot of direct engagement with them as a group. That's something I'm kind of disappointed in. They've not been responding to our outreach, but we most of my work, when I do direct advocacy, is directly with members of Congress. We've not had a lot of penetration with the administration that's going out right now. We got spoiled with the Obama administration. The Obama administration had, they set up 2 reps who met with our ecumenical body, the WIST, Washington Interreligious Staff Community, at least once a month. And my first meeting, ecumenical meeting there, was with them, which was their last meeting. No such thing with the Trump administration. Again, individuals have access to the administration, but every denomination, our ecumenical partners are saying the same thing, that it's hard to get a meeting with anyone but from the faith community. But work a lot with members of Congress. I was very blessed to come in with relationships with the North Carolina representatives. I know most of them in person. Representative Price, Chapel Hill area, he lives in the United Methodist building, and one day he was walking out at the same time I was, but he and I know each other. Also know Butterfield, formed a relationship with Cleaver out of Missouri. It's all about relationships. It's all about relationships. And oftentimes you're going to get a lot more if you can get them to know who you are, even to the point if you can get the staffers to know who you are. So if you want to talk with your member of Congress, be very persistent, because they get so many asks. People want to have a meeting, especially now with Zoom, where you don't have to travel to DC to meet with them now. As a matter of fact, Zoom the virus had made it more difficult to have a face-to-face meeting, because now I'm noticing that most of the meetings are with their staff now, because again, everyone has access to them. So they're just kind of loading down the staff. But that's the way you get things passed and done in DC. You've got to make an impact on them personally. They're not responding, and I just say this candidly, to anything that's not from their constituents. If you are, everything, the first question they ask, if we want to have a Zoom meeting with them, and if it's a question and answer at the end, they're going to ask you, how many of these folk are my constituents? And so, and even with some of them, if you want to send them an email on their webpage, and they ask you for your zip code, and if your zip code is not within their district, the email won't even let you go, won't even go through. And so that's a main piece to remember, that if you want to have some impact on them, if you want to do a sign-on letter, you want to send them communication, make sure you let them know you are a constituent and that you're representing their constituents. That's really what's having a lot of impact with them. We also, this is kind of how we do our work on the left. We have a web page that's a part of the PCUSA web page. Alerts are probably our most consistent form of contact with Presbyterians. It's a one-page statement asking for you to contact your member of Congress on a particular issue, asking for you to do a certain ask. Now, we do all of the work. We will have a template where you, if you click the link, it'll take you straight to your member of Congress. You can either send a template statement that we have, or you can write your own statement. But and I have a couple of examples of that following. Obviously, we do webinars, such as this invite tonight, where we do our own webinars as well. Got a couple of examples of those. Facebook is probably where we get most of our hits. People go to our Facebook page more than often. We do tweet, especially when we have fellows and seminarians. They do a lot of the tweeting for us. We have a blog that's excellently written, but of course it's a blog and nobody reads it. We do a quarterly newsletter 4 times a year, and we write articles for Horizon, Presbyterians Today. This is an example of an alert. The one on the left is an international one. The one on the right is a domestic one. And again, at the bottom, you'll see where it says, click the link below to log in and send your message. And so they are pretty user-friendly. And if you would like to receive these, if you don't receive this, you're not on our distribution list, if you would let Rodney be aware, and he can send it to me, and we can put you on our distribution list. And this is a statement, the last one that we wrote just a couple of days ago, basically calling for a peaceful transfer of power. And again, we send this out throughout the denomination to Presbyterians and asking them to, this one is basically not an alert, so it's not asking you to call your member of Congress, but asking for prayer that we have a peaceful transition of power. And there's a lot of energy. And one of the things that's good about being in DC is that the ecumenical and interfaith community is very strong. We work very well together. You know, I've worked in Virginia and in North Carolina, and pastors, sometimes we work well, we play well together, sometimes we don't play well together. But on the national level, I mean, there's so many sign-on letters that we do. Before COVID, we did so many press conferences together. We participated in rallies, speeches, just a strong community. And Presbyterians are very well respected among the ecumenical community. I know Rodney said that your next dangerous dialogue is on Israel-Palestine, especially for the courageous stance that we did when we divested in 3 companies, Motorola, Caterpillar, and HP, because they basically were the positions that they took in relationship with the Israeli army. Got a lot of flack for it, but also we're one of the leaders when it comes to that issue. And there are certain things that people come to us first, especially as I mentioned earlier about some of the written documents that we have. Sign-on letters, okay? Obviously everyone's doing Zoom right now. So that's a big part of our ministry right now. There's a lot more access. I can no longer say to someone who asked me to preach on a Sunday, well, you know, I'm preaching somewhere else. Well, they say, well, just send us in a video. You know, so it used to be that I could say, well, I'm preaching somewhere, but Zoom has really, like your ministries, have taken off with us, and we really are utilizing that wholeheartedly. This is a webinar that we did. This started in May. It went for 6 weeks, talking about how the virus is impacting racial ethnic communities. The Black community, we know that 2 out of every 3 deaths are African American, the coronavirus. We talked about the impact on the Asian community as far as racial racial violence, the LGBTQAI+, IA+ community, Latinx community, indigenous impact, and immigrant community. Now, we didn't do this solo. We did it with other partners under Compassion, Peace, and Justice. But we do produce webinars that we can also, if you're on our distribution list, you can get information on. This is one we did on the power of protest, and we also wrote an alert on how protests has become criminalized, especially recently we're in the National Guard, and the police are really responding very violently to peaceful protests in this country. And it has a negative image with a lot of Americans. They automatically associate it with looting and with violence, but 85% of the protests in this country are nonviolent. We do once a year, we do ecumenical advocacy days, which is our signature event that we do. And we did it this year, digital, and we'll do it next year, digital as well. But it's a training weekend where you come in on Friday, leave on Sunday, and you have workshops the entire day. Obviously, it's been condensed, but it will be over 2 to 3 days, starting on April the 18th of 2021. The first day, Friday, is just for Presbyterians. We average about 200 Presbyterians who come together for training. And then Friday night, primarily Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, it's an interfaith ecumenical group. And usually when it was in person in DC, we were averaging between 700 and 800 people for this. But this is also something we can send you information on. And we also will bring it to the seminary. We're in the staff, well, we were taking it on the road before coronavirus, but we will do a workshop for your class or any type of relationship. We really are, I'm very interested in having classes at seminary, talk about advocacy in the PCUSA or overall. Very quickly, Rod, I'm trying to keep an eye on the time. I'm right at 20 minutes now. So I can go about 5 more minutes. Okay. These are some of the resources. We have a wonderful communications department in the church, and I know everyone knows about Presbyterians Today and the Outlook. And these are subscriptions, the first 2, but don't tell them I told you. You can read the articles free online. You can access them. Really, they do a good job, I think, of keeping you up to date on what's going on in the life of the church. Obviously with the national church, but more so the stories are about what local congregations are doing. Unbound is online only, and it's our justice periodical. That I think if you looked it up, it's really quite interesting, well done, has a lot of good articles. They do podcasts and webinars as well. And the news service is a free electronic newsletter that you can get. And if you're not signed up, I really would encourage you to sign up because it does a really good job. And each day it comes out with the page with about 6 or 7 stories on it, on what's going on in the life of the church. So I really push our periodicals because very few denominations have the type of outreach that we do. But I'm really surprised each time I go out in the church how few Presbyterians are aware of the periodicals that we have. And then this is one that we did at the beginning of the when George Floyd was killed. We have a racial justice resources page, and these are just the categories. And there are resources up under each one of these, and you can go, if you type in PCUSA racial justice resources, it'll almost take you straight to it. And the worship resources, policy statements, we're dealing primarily with racial justice. We push the participation in the election. We really want to clear up the misunderstanding that a lot of Christians in this country have about what it means, separation of church and state. It doesn't mean what it says it means. Not that the church and state are completely separated. You can, as a Christian, you can be very engaged in the political process. And also to clear up the theological misunderstanding that people have that you're bringing politics into the church. You're not bringing politics into church. You're actually fulfilling the mandate of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. And so we talk a lot about how you're not bringing politics into church, but you're really, and I talk about advocacy as being a spiritual discipline, just like meditation, reading scripture, and because I strongly believe that from scripture, you cannot be a person of faith in the Christian in the Christian faith if you're not an advocate for justice. You just can't see other people suffering and not do something about it, not have a voice and not try to make a difference. We're partners with the Poor People's Campaign. Rodney made mention of the Moral Monday. This is the second stage of the poor people of the Moral Monday movement. Rodney's very aware of this. Barber basically took what he did in North Carolina to the national stage. From 2013 to 2016, it was the Moral Monday movement, and as Rodney shared, both of us have been to jail there. Richard, I don't know whether that's going to get him in trouble. I noticed he told you that I had been to jail, but I don't think he told you he had been to jail as well. But this is Poor People's Assembly is again, it's on the national scale what happened in North Carolina with the Moral Monday, but it's also took the 1968 Poor People's Campaign that Martin Luther King Jr. started in January of that year, saying that they were going to amass poor whites, poor blacks, poor Hispanics in the nation's capital with a tent city, and basically to do advocacy for living wage and for justice for impoverished men and women. We know that he was assassinated in April of that year, and the campaign happened, but it did not have the impact, and it was really no longer in existence a couple of years later. So Reverend Barber on the left and Reverend Liz Theo Harris, who is a Presbyterian minister, are now the co-conveners of a revitalized Poor People's Campaign. They're in 42 states. So what they ask for the branches to do is to set up a branch in your local state capital and do advocacy. Labor is a strong component of it, but it really is very engaged. As a matter of fact, at our last General Assembly, they had a date of June the 20th that we set aside for Presbyterians to participate in the rally, the virtual rally that was held. So I'm going to stop there. Let's see, I'm going to stop my sharing. And we can have some conversation. Let's see. All right. So Aaron, I'm going to make you.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say thank you so much for an informative description of all that goes on in the Office of Public Witness. Thank you for your work there on behalf of the PCUSA and all of us. I feel well represented as a person who's part of Union Presbyterian Seminary with you there in Washington, lifting high just that banner as well. Grateful to you for this presentation tonight. And just wanted to start off our conversation tonight with just a few questions, just to get us started and go from there. So one of the things you mentioned as you were talking tonight is the fact that you bear witness and advocate for the PCUSA with legislators and during better times with the executive branch as well. What do you think should be the role that the church plays in influencing policy? Should the church be listened to? Should we have more of an impact on policy? Just give me a background of what, if things are working well, what should the role of the church be?
Yeah, a couple of responses. One, I do think we need to, as I mentioned earlier, do some re-education of our members about the role, the relationship between faith and politics, because, you know, a lot of Christians will say, well, we should not have any relationship with politics. We don't want, you know, you hear people saying things like, you're bringing politics into the church. I don't want to hear those political sermons. We need to redefine again what we're doing. We're doing advocacy, and it's a fulfillment of our Christian discipleship. And so therefore, the Presbyterian Church, with most Christian denominations, our individual congregations do wonderful work in charity. Mm-hmm. And it's legitimate work. We work hard, and I think Presbyterians, you know, I think the Catholic Church probably has the only church that can match our theological understanding of the fact that we are to help people. We are to try to feed people, because, you know, they have good works theology, things along that line, which we can't. You ain't saved by good works, but that's a whole nother webinar. But where we stop short is that we limit it to charity. We don't take it a step further and try to deal with the systemic problems that are going on. And so that's when people think you're starting to become political. And I tell congregations, you've got to do both. You've got to do both. You got to understand that there are legitimate needs in the community that we have to try to meet, because people are hungry. People are homeless. People are need help right now. In the church that I pastored, Covenant in Durham, one winter, it was snowing so hard, I was just about to go home. One guy showed up at the church and he said, I need somewhere to stay. He said, I don't have any words to say. So I took him to a hotel, and I went to the session. I told him, I said, we need an emergency pastor's fund. So when something like that happens, I don't have to wait to ask the deacons, will they put this guy? And so they allotted money for me to do that. So we've got to continue to do that, because I don't want people to think I'm criticizing their work. But we also got to understand that there are more people out there who are hurting than the church can handle. And people want to take care of themselves. People don't want to ask for handouts. People want to be able to feed their own children, so they need a living wage. So we got to go downtown to City Hall, and especially, I would say right now, in the atmosphere that we're in, you're going to be a lot more productive going to your municipality and going to your state legislators than you are in coming to DC, because nothing's happening in DC legislatively. I mean, in Mitch McConnell, it is a shame and a disgrace. He will not move any legislation from the House. The first bill that they passed was a voting rights bill, and he called it a Democrat bill. I've never seen, and I'm a history major, I've never seen such partisan politics. And again, I can't understand how he sleeps at night. And then I do blame him, because he is the one responsible for seeing which legislation gets to the Senate. So a lot more action, however, is happening in states. Mm-hmm. There's some really good action that happen. And actually, we oftentimes hear about the number of voter suppression bills that are going on, but actually the voter empowerment bills are more. We just don't hear about them. A lot of states are making it easier to vote, and especially we see with this last election, wherein Biden is about to get 80 million votes, just for him. And so we've got to understand that we can have an impact. It can be done, again, at your local city council, through your city, because a lot of cities are raising the living wage now. And that's because of the work of advocates. It's taken a while, over the last decade, but it's starting to bear fruit now. And that's the other thing I say to people. You have to be in it for the long haul. You're not going to show up one day and all of a sudden they're going to say, okay, I never thought about that. It never happens that way. You got to come back. They have to know who you are. But look at ways in which you can identify what your passions are. Mm-hmm. Because again, a warning is, don't try to do everything. That's where people get burned out. They say, well, there's so many issues out there. I say, follow your heart. Follow your heart. What touches you? What keeps you awake at night? And for me, it's like healthcare. My son had meningitis. Our son had meningitis at 9 months old. My wife had full health coverage. I had full health coverage. Out of a $300,000 bill, we paid about $3,000. If we had not had health coverage, we would have lost everything, because we still know that the major cause of bankruptcy is medical bills. So that's my passion. That's one of my passions. I always speak about healthcare. Find out what your passions are and find a way to communicate that in a way that works for you. So I kind of went on a lot of things. That was
perfect. Thank you so much. Wonderful first response. And I thank you for also lifting up that notion of moving the church from charity to justice, and giving us some wonderful examples of what that looks like. I think the church often is rightly concerned about charity. How do we respond to immediate needs? But the question that we often don't ask is, so it's one thing to know that somebody is hungry, but it's another thing to say, why is this person hungry? And then what can I do to help this person care for themselves so they're not hungry again tomorrow? So that shift from charity to justice, please.
And just add one more thing, is that in your following through on your passion, make sure you talk to some people who are impacted by what you're concerned about. Because what we oftentimes do is we talk to each other. We might bring an expert in, but if you're interested in healthcare, you need to talk to someone who doesn't have healthcare. Yes. You really need to talk to someone who's homeless and have a conversation with them, because I've found people know what they need. They just are having problems getting to that. But again, I just want to add, I encourage us to have these serious, dangerous dialogues with people who are impacted by injustice.
Thank you for that, and facilitating that. Maybe we can come to DC one day and actually have you introduce us to some of the people who are going through it that inspire the policies that you are working towards. Really appreciate that. So one of the things I might ask you is this. What has been give me a story of one of your greatest successes at the work that you've been doing in Washington, D.C.
Now, you do know I've been in D.C. during the Trump administration, right? You are aware of that, right?
I understand wholeheartedly.
It's been a very frustrating 4 years for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this: before I came there, when Clinton was in office, our office, in coalition with our partners, was very instrumental with the forgiveness of African debt. Where, matter of fact, when you look that up on the internet, when Clinton announces it in the Rose Garden, Eleanor, Jay Herbert's predecessor,
Mm-hmm.
was standing beside him. And she was standing on behalf of the African community. So we were very effective in that. We also done some good work on payday lending.
Mm-hmm.
We also, what are some other issues? A lot of it lately has been primarily the coalition work that we have done, and we have not necessarily taken the lead, but we've been a part of overtures to the White House and to this current administration. There's really no one thing that I can point to say that was wherein we actually moved the button during this administration, especially with Congress. I do think that we have been very effective in talking with Presbyterians. I think half of my work is in travel. Half of it I'm in DC. The other half I'm out visiting with Presbyterians and with congregations. Mm-hmm. And again, the same elevator speech that I'm giving to you tonight, talking about, matter of fact, I have a Bible study that I do to congregations talking about the heavy emphasis of justice in the Bible. And I talk about the Justice Bible. I was looking up there because I have one up on the wall, in the New Justice Bible, and trying to help them to identify resources so they can start engaging initially in this conversation about what's the justice ministry of our local congregation, who are our advocates, what are ways that we can partner with the office, what are ways that we can identify the local issues in our community and globally that we want to work on.
Well, thank you. And because I thought you were going to tell me a little bit about the ecumenical advocacy days, and I'd love for you to share a little bit more about the way that you bring 700-800 people together in DC to talk about some of these issues.
Has anyone been there? Anyone on this call?
You've got Amy on the call here. She's already given you a shout out. I know Amy's just had eye surgery, so I don't know that she's able to respond, but you've got a real advocate with our student.
Okay. Amy, you can leave your video off if you like. Would you like to say anything about EAD?
Sure. I mean, it's just so amazing to be with so many different people that are, I don't know, I mean, that understand the needs that are out there and are so interested in working towards making things better. I mean, to have such a large number of people, I mean, it's great to be with that many Presbyterians, but to have the other people in addition to Presbyterians that are all just so focused on trying to improve things. And the speakers are amazing. I mean, it's just, I've been twice. And it's just really encouraging to participate in the conversations. And I always learn something. The last time I went, I mean, I had no idea that, just one example, that the drone strikes and how they have impacted people and all the problems associated with those and the innocent people that have been harmed by that. And I mean, I had no idea. So just, that's one example, but it's just a really good opportunity.
Thank you, Amy. And as she said, you know, we come together on that Friday morning about 9, only Presbyterians, at least 200 of us, and we stay together all day. And it's actually, it can either be one event or 2 events in one. The first day is just for Presbyterians. And then if you want to go to the second event, which is ecumenical interfaith, then you go over to the Doubletree, and from Friday night again to Monday, and workshops all day Saturday, worship on Sunday with workshops, and on Monday you go and visit with your member of Congress. And we are always the largest contingent of any faith group that comes. Presbyterians are always the largest contingent.
Amen. Well, thank you for that. There's a question in the chat, and I'm going to ask Pamela Wilson to ask her question of Jimmie. It deals a bit with race, and how do we deal with race?
So thank you very much. I'm Pam Wilson. I am in New Hope Presbytery at West Raleigh Presbyterian Church with Amy Symes. And my question is, given the action, Reverend Hawkins, that's happening in states, where are the best opportunities for anti-racism work in North Carolina?
What? Okay.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say, Jimmie, you said great things are happening in the States. I wondered how recently you've been back to Durham.
That's been a while. And Amy, you know, I'm a member of New Hope Presbytery as well. In North Carolina, I would dare say probably, and Rodney can speak to this as well, with what's going on with the North Carolina NAACP. You know, it would what's his name, Rodney?
Spearman, T. Anthony Spearman, yeah.
Yeah, T. Anthony Spearman being the president. He works also with the North Carolina Council of Churches, and he's been talking about racial justice for a while. He was very engaged with Moral Monday. So I think that would be a good resource. Within the state, I would dare say, you know, Charlotte has done a lot of work on affordable housing issues, and especially along a racial line, that there's some good local work that you're doing there. Durham is a hotbed for activism. There's an organization called Durham Can. Do y'all have an affiliate in Charlotte?
We had one, and we're trying to bring one back, but our IAF affiliate is in process now. We know that they just started one in Durham. I mean, Durham Can has been long there, and they just started one in Raleigh in the last month and a half as well.
That's right, in Wake County. That's right. Yes, it's called Wake Can.
Yeah, the Durham one has been in existence, I mean, 20 years, at least 20 years, and they really, I was a part of a national webinar 2 days ago, and they made mention of Durham Can. They are an excellent example, and they do a good job of putting heat on legislators. You know, you have to, when you come to one of their meetings, if you're a member of the city council, you have to make a commitment before you leave that night. They don't say go back home. So I think that that's an organization that's dealing with community organizing that's really effective in North Carolina. Who else is in North Carolina, Rodney?
So a few good groups. In Charlotte, we have a group called Race Matters for Juvenile Justice that's really doing a good job of education. They do a 2-day anti-racism workshop that's been really good. We also have a group called Rise that came out of MECMIN, which is our local interfaith group here in Charlotte, that does a 2-day anti-racism workshop focused on the role of the church and the way that the church has both participated in creating a racialized system and getting us out of it. And more recently, Aaron and I will tell you a little bit about something that's been sponsored by the Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation called RAP Track, the Reimagine America Project, Truth, Reconciliation, Atonement Commission for Charlotte. And we're actually doing a Truth and Reconciliation Commission here in Charlotte. We've had our first hearing on October 22nd, looking at the criminal justice system and the way that it's disadvantaged Black and brown people, with the goal of sensitizing people to having to deal with this issue, and then coming back to talk about systemic changes that need to come out of it. Our second hearing will be on December, I believe we're going to move it to the 8th, and that's going to focus on the homeless crisis that we see in the city of Charlotte right now. How do we begin to address the fact that we've got tent cities growing up, creeping in everywhere across our uptown region? People sleeping outside and the weather's getting colder, and people have no PPEs. I think we just distributed 1,000 PPEs to those groups today through RAP Track. So we're thinking about how do we continue to respond to the immediate needs of people, particularly because of that are there because of race in the city today. So those are some of the things that are going on in the state of North Carolina that we hope continue to spread forth.
And Pamela, I would say, you know, again, with this being a digital environment that we're in, you don't necessarily have to, you know, say only North Carolina, because you can get anyone to do a webinar for you now. And there are a lot of resources. Racial justice, a real focus of compassion, peace, and justice. So we have the Intercultural Racial Ethnic Agency that's doing a lot of racial justice issues. My office, obviously, we will do webinars for you talking about racial justice. I've got a PowerPoint webinar that I can do talking about, you know, what are ways that we can do address the issue of racial justice. This is the big issue in the Presbyterian Church right now. I am really excited about the variety of congregations that are talking about racial justice. Of course, the books, White Fragility, everyone's reading that now, White Privilege. But the denomination is setting up, again, that racial justice resources page, is trying to connect with local congregations and with presbyteries on how do we engage this conversation amongst ourselves, especially white on white conversation. That seems to be the trend right now, where the white community is saying that, okay, we need to have this conversation with ourselves and talk to our members about white privilege to get them to understand You don't have to get on the defensive. We can have a conversation. You know, we don't want anyone to feel guilt or shame, but we really need to look at how white supremacy has infiltrated and infected the totality of all of our systems in this country, criminal justice system, education, things along that line. So I'm excited about where we are as a denomination.
So I'd love to hear, just to follow up on Suzanne's question, a bit more about what the ecumenical groups are doing to deal with issues of race in Washington, D.C. Is there a collective work that's going on as well? Do you all come together to do this? Or is it usually held in the silos of the individual denominations?
Yeah, it's primarily, to be honest with you, we have 74 organizations that are working together. So we're dealing with everything. So there's not just a concentration on racial justice. A lot of the focus right now, obviously in the last 6 months, has been on the 2020 election, with the understanding that racial justice is a component of that, because we talk about voter suppression. You know, again, we were talking offline, me, you, and Aaron, about Detroit and how they wanted to say the two commissioners said, well, we'll vote to confirm the votes as long as you don't confirm Wayne County, which is Detroit, which is like all black, you know? And so when the issues that we deal with are just across the board, but I think many of us have a focus on racial justice and what's the racial angle in this and how strongly impacted. But to be honest with you, Rodney, oh my Lord, there's so much work that's going on. I mean, I actually turn down 80% of the things that come across my desk. I get to pick and choose. And because the community has a network where we send out, I receive about 10 emails a day from the community saying, we've got this sign-on letter, we've got this effort going on. And so, but again, not just with a concentration on racial justice, but on a lot of the justice issues in the country right now.
And one thing I wanted to ask, have you all been involved in the work on Barbara Lee's HRES 40, which is calling for a National Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Have you all known about that? And is there work with the denominations pushing for that?
Oh yeah, I can't think of anyone that opposes HR 40, you know. I mean, all it is asking, let's set up a committee to have a conversation about it, you know, and they can't even get that passed right now. But yeah, reparations is a big issue right now. And a lot of, and what's interesting to me is that looking at reparations, it's gaining ground now. You know, who was that who gave $1 million? The Episcopal Church. Janice, one denomination, and this was with not with the whole denomination, has set aside $1 million for reparations. You know, we know that the universities, Georgetown, Brown, University of Virginia, are setting aside, at least they're putting up monuments saying that this is a form of reparation. You know, Georgetown has set aside scholarships for the descendants of I think it was 286 enslaved men and women who were sold in the beginning of their history to save the university. So they now have scholarships in perpetuity for the descendants. And so reparations is something that I think with this new administration, I could see, again, we got to get rid of Mitch McConnell. Well, I say that lovingly. We have to replace Mitch McConnell or get someone who will bring some legislation. But I think as far as the House is concerned, you're going to see movement along that line. That there's going to be some, again, they have passed 300 bills in the House that can't get to the Senate because Mitch McConnell won't move them. And they all are very progressive. And so with that, we all are in support of at least starting there with HR 40 and having that conversation. But some of us, again, are further along than others. And I think that you're going to see within the next 5 years, next decade, where this is going to be a conversation that's a part of the normal conversation that we have. What are ways that we can, and again, I think the movement has gone past a financial restitution, but what can we do to uplift communities? You know, what kind of job training can we offer? What kind of educational incentives can we offer? And I think that's the direction that it's going in now, which I think should be, everyone should be receptive to that, because there's no doubt when you look at the wealth disparities, they're right along racial lines. I mean, the average Black family has $17,000 in holdings, and the average white family has 170. There was one statistic I read that said that 1 out of every 100 white Americans are millionaires. It's like 1 out of 500 Black Americans on me. So this wealth disparity that we have, and then the inequity in schools and things along that line, we've got to do more to build up impoverished communities. And I say this last thing, we're no longer talking about racial equality, we're talking about racial equity. You know, that's the word that everybody's using now, where you need to give people what they need in order to catch up, because some communities are so far behind. Equality means you get $1, I get $1, but some communities need $10. Some communities need $1,000 in order to be built up. So that when we talk about racial injustice, a lot of it's what can we do to bring equity to the states.
Thank you for that, and thank you for all the work that you're doing in that regard around the issue of race. And race, as we've seen in the George Floyd uprisings this summer, as we've seen because of the exposure of the fact that African Americans are suffering at a much greater rate than whites from COVID, as our Latino communities now, we definitely see the racial disparities that exist in our nation. Glad to know that there are people that are working.
And if I could add one more other thing, I will say this now. Let me see, looks like Suzanne is probably, looks like the youngest person. You know, once, and Aaron looks pretty young, once most of us are out of the way, I'm really encouraged by this young generation. This new generation, Generation Z, they're going to be the most racially diverse generation this country has ever seen. And right now, what they're predicting to happen in 10 and 20 years is happening in the Midwestern part of this country right now. Most of the children in the Midwest part of this country in public schools are children of color. Mm. So, and when you look at the murder of Mr. George Floyd, these young people, they were young people and they were diverse. As a matter of fact, if we're going to be honest about it, most of them were young white kids. Yes. That showed up for racial justice. These kids have a different attitude, and I call them Obama's kids because they grew up under Obama, so therefore they have, and that's why they were so outraged over Trump. You know, and so I think I'm very hopeful for the direction that the country is headed in. My only concern is, will people of faith play a role in the coming revolution? We're the only ones sitting on the sidelines. And I challenge the church. The history of this country, whenever there were prophetic movements, it was led by people of faith. You look at the abolitionist movement. People of faith, churches were a part of the Underground Railroad. You look at the Civil Rights Movement. There's never been a more church-oriented movement in the history of the world, social justice movement. I mean, but now you have the Women's March, you have the March for Our Lives, you have most of the marches, with the exception of the Poor People's Campaign, it started outside of the faith community. And I think we have got to regain our prophetic voice, and especially as an African American, I'm very concerned about the African American church losing its prophetic voice right now.
Dare I say, amen.
You know,
yeah, amen to that. I see a hand from Richard Boyce.
Yeah, Rodney, I don't know quite how to jump in. Jimmie, you've given me a great dose of hope, just your perspective, particularly on where we are in the Peace USA, that perhaps our diminishment now is an opportunity for something new to be born. But let me see if I can frame this question up, because you mentioned young people, and I just think my question has to do with the pace of change and how I'm a parent of 4 daughters. Think about that for a little bit. I've been a preacher mostly in small town congregations. Mm-hmm. I've been a mayor in a small town called Belmont, and now I'm a professor in a seminary that's funded mostly by older Presbyterians, but is welcoming and excited, particularly in Charlotte, with some of the new fresh vision, like Amy Symes coming into our midst. So I'm always I feel like I'm always balancing, Jimmie. I want to keep as many people together, but I want to keep us moving. I mean, that's the hard thing. I don't want to move so quickly that we lose most of our people, but I don't want to stop moving, because I do think we'll lose our younger generation. And I think we've got the split in the PCUSA when you mention things like divestment and so forth, and watch how disappointed in some ways the younger people are in our lack of rapid movement, but how cautious. Duke Energy's on the hit list, and many of the elders in the city of Charlotte work for Duke Energy. So I'm just, again, I celebrate, one of the gifts to me is my friendship and collegiality with Rodney Sadler, because he keeps, I hope and pray that we were meant to be together, because I think even on Moral Monday marches, we go up and I say, well, what did we accomplish? Well, Jimmie and Rodney got in jail, but I say, well, what legislation did we get done? That was the, that's the push and the pull. I want to, my days are getting shorter. And I wonder when I look back, say, well, I got something done, but I also, I want the seminary in particularly to be a place that celebrates people who are deeply impatient. Because Suzanne mentioned the color of compromise. That's not a complimentary title for compromising and moderation and getting small things done. Too often the PCUS, for instance, was on the wrong side of the civil rights movement, except for a few brave exceptions. That's a long statement, but it's, how do you, in your position, Jimmie, and having come there through deep experience in the parish, decide the pace? How much do I push? When do I back off? And how do I keep everybody moving forward?
And Richard, I think you're hitting on something that's a dilemma for the activist community. We have got to learn to speak to people in a language they understand. And I think it's right now is one size fits all, where we go to every community with the same conversation. Pastoring a church, first thing you got to do is learn your folk. You got to learn, if you come in there with an agenda and you think you're going to change that church and you give yourself a year to get it done, you're going to be out of that church in a year, because they're going to run you out of it. Because culture, and the people that support that culture change slowly. One of the things I'm trying to say is that, for example, let's look at what the working class. We've got to learn to speak to people who are white working class without turning them off, because they have some legitimate issues. That's how the rise of Trump. Trump got 70 million votes, primarily from white working class folk. Now, his numbers went up with Hispanics and with Black men in particular, which I find to be quite interesting. But I think they're frustrated because he's the only person who's come along that they felt cared about them. Now, of course, he did not care about them, but they felt listened to. And so I think one of the issues that we're struggling with is that we can't have a message that we try to send to everyone in the same way. We've got to make, the church is the only institution that can communicate to people that we care about you, that your issues are my issues. And I do think this is a major failing of the Democratic Party right now, where the issues that they're talking about should automatically relate to white working class people. It's the same issues. You want enough money where you work, you want health care. But obviously there's some undercurrents going on. But I do think one of the issues is that we do have to know when to push and when to step back. And as a pastor, that's one of the things I had to learn. I came in young pastor, I still remember my first time at Covenant. I gave a 20-minute speech when I was introduced to the congregation. I want us to be engaged in the community. I want us to talk about justice. And I want to, we want to do this and we want to do this. So after I finished talking, one of the elders was sitting on the front row, right up near the front of the church. And this true story, he looked at me, he said, I got a question for you. I said, what's your question? He says, why didn't we have any flowers this morning? I'm like, I just got through laying out my scheme, my vision for the church, and he's waiting for me to shut up so he can talk about the flowers. That's all he cares about. And so you got to learn to help people to grow. And I think that's the push and pull And I close with this story about Jesus. Jesus, you know, we all know the story of the rich young ruler. It's one of my favorite stories. And this story is told in all the Gospels. Is it in John? I don't think it's in John. But the rich young ruler who comes, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Now, I love Mark's version. Mark's version says that when Jesus asks this guy, you know, obey the commandments, do not steal, do not kill. He said, I've done that. I've done that all of my life. And Mark's version is unique in that Mark says Jesus looked at him and loved him. And loved him. Because this guy was being sincere. He was not just saying something. Okay, did something happen?
I just did that, yes.
Okay, this guy was being, Rodney, I don't want to look at myself. This guy was being sincere, and he was not just saying it, but then Jesus said, take everything that you have, sell it, give it to the poor, and come and follow me. And of course, the gospel say this was too much of an ask, so the guy went away sorrowful. And my point with that story is this, that Jesus met this guy where he was. That when Jesus saw his honesty, his earnestness, that he was trying to live a faithful life, but Jesus didn't leave him where he was. And so I think the part about being a pastor is that oftentimes we meet people where they are, but we especially after we've been there a little while, we kind of fall in love with the folk. We don't want to kind of hurt their feelings, but we got to keep nudging. We got to keep nudging. And as long as we keep nudging them out of love, because we're not just, we have a desire for justice. We want to promote justice, but we also want to help our people to grow. We want them to understand what does it really mean to be a follower of Jesus Christ, because it is no light ask. If you want to follow Jesus, this is what it means to follow Jesus. But we got to do it again. We can't, and I think, again, our young justice advocates, they come in, they're full of energy, they're impatient, they want to change. It takes time. It takes time to help people to understand, but I found that people, once they find out you care about them, they'll let you get away with almost anything. I mean, I got arrested 3 times before I left the state of North Carolina. And don't believe everybody in that church was happy with their pastor going to jail, you know, but they loved me. But if I had done that when I first got there, you know, that would have been a short tenure, but they knew who I was by that time. And so my point is that I love the wording that you use. We got to push and pull. It's a push and pull. And there's no one formula, because wherever you go, it's going to be different. And so you got to know who you're dealing with. You got to understand your folk, but you also got to keep nudging. Keep every now and then say something that's a little controversial. You know, every now and then do push that thing, that line right to the edge. But again, so that's what I think it's about. Life is so short, man. The only thing I hate about this, the way God is self-creation, by the time you figure this thing out, it's time to go. You know, but we got to keep pushing. I do believe it is a pushing, but we do it out of love. To me, that's the key. Long as you are genuinely concerned about folk.
Thank you, Jimmie. Let me just say quickly, Rodney, our job of people on the screen is to get people who are distrustful of the Washington office in conversation with Jimmie. I think we've got a limited time where we've got Jimmie Hawkins, and Jimmie's got a way of connecting with people, all people. And it's, Jimmie, God bless you for it. I'm just sorry we don't have 5,000 people on this screen.
Well, I appreciate the seminary, because I do think one of the things we want to do is to connect seminarians with the office. We really want each one to leave the seminary knowing that there's an office there. So if they need us, we're there. Because I'm really dismayed with how many of our people are not even aware we have an office, especially our young people.
Amen. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that rich answer. Thank you for bringing up that notion. I just wanted to say one thing. Richard always pushes that notion of why doesn't policy change when the prophets talk? And one of the things that I always want to remind people of is that prophets in the Bible never got the people to change. I mean, only, what was it? The most successful one was Jonah, and he didn't want to be successful. He really didn't want to be successful.
And the book ended, hey, Rod, the book ends, he's still mad with God.
That's God. Why was I successful?
Strike him, Lord. But I will
the
say
role
that,
of the prophet is sometimes just to proclaim the word of the Lord to a world that's forgotten it,
that's right.
to help remember what God has called us to do. And good Lord willing, people will change. But even if they don't, we still have to be faithful to bear witness to that word of God. So
Stay at it, Rodney. Bless you.
amen. Amen. Elena had a question. I wanted her to ask her question of you, Jimmie.
So, Jimmie, you said that a fear or concern you have is that the Black church is losing its prophetic voice.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say more about that? Why do you say that?
Yeah, because
How do you feel?
yeah, the Black, the only benefit of oppression, racial oppression in this country was that it really produced a lot of Black prophets in the history of this country. When you read the history of America, I mean, I'm a history major again. The abolitionist movement had and interestingly enough, with the abolitionist movement, many of the Black prophets were Presbyterian, because the Presbyterian church trained them. It didn't support them, you know, and they let them go out there and do what they wanted, but it trained. I mean, Henry Highland Garnet, you just do a roll call of Black abolitionists, and most of them are clergy. So what has happened in the life of the Black church is that part of it I equate with this mega church movement, in this prosperity movement, where it really, I think, to a larger degree than most denominations, has infiltrated the Black church. Probably because the message, if you're talking to an oppressed people and impoverished people, and you tell them, if you have faith, God will give you good health and plenty of wealth. That's very appealing. And so you look at most of the Black clergy in this country, with the exception of, and there are prophets. Moss Jr. is a prophet. Reverend Barber is a prophet. And Reverend Barber probably has the highest sense. But most of the ones that we hear about now are starting to say, are preaching this prosperity ministry. And I think to a disproportionate degree. It is really becoming a more difficult sell to get Black clergy engaged in justice movements. And when I was in North Carolina, and Rodney can attest to this, it was very difficult to get Black clergy to support the Moral Monday movement. Now, some of it had to do with socialization, wherein they didn't want to support gay rights.
Yeah.
Many of them did not say, well, we're not in support of that, and y'all are hanging out with these lesbians and gay men. But I really believe that was an excuse.
Yeah.
I really don't think their heart was in it. And I mean, it was amazing to me. I wrote out a letter to 50 preachers. I said, an angry Black preacher. And I asked the question, where are you in this justice movement? So I'm hard on the Black church because I'm a part of that community. But I do think it's indicative of where we are as a nation. You know, we talk a lot about white evangelicals and how can they support Trump. You know, this man who for many Christians appears to be ungodly, you know, who calls a book of the Bible 2 Corinthians. You know, he does not even know that we call it 2 Corinthians. And you know, he's Presbyterian. He said recently again that he's a Presbyterian, but we can justify. I'm concerned that many Christians today are more influenced by their political position than they are by their faith. Wherein if you are a Democrat or Republican, that you pick a church wherein it's either a progressive or conservative church, regardless whether it's in scripture. So to get back to the origin of your question, I'm very concerned about where we are as African-American Christians in this country, because the faith component, the faith voice, I'm still waiting.
Yeah.
With the exception of Barber, there's not a lot of Black clergy who are out there who, especially these ones like T.D. Jakes, I'll give you an example. Jakes could have so much influence. Oh my Lord, he could have, and he won't touch a justice issue with a fine-tooth comb. I mean, he'll come close to that line. Like he had a conversation about a month ago. But he won't say it. The word justice won't leave his mouth. That bothers me. How can you be a clergy, Christian clergy, and not even mention the word justice? You know, so that's my concern. Yeah.
Jimmie, I'd like to follow up if I could, Kathy responded to my question and said, I feel like younger adults are quick to see and move quickly away from hypocrisy, which is an issue that's been part of the sociological critique of the church, is that young adults see members of the church as hypocrites. You know, they are racist, they're homophobic, they're misogynist, they're blah blah, you know. And so the church, the institutional church, for many young people has no value, because they see it as hypocritic. And I agree. And so they're acting, they have great moral conviction. Somebody, I don't know who the pundit was, who recently said that the youth vote engagement in this election didn't come out, it wasn't formed in this election, that young adults have been involved in justice issues for some time, particularly around gay rights and the environment. And so they've been doing political work, they've been doing justice work. And then here is a chance for them to vote in some cases for the very first time, not because they were so young and this was their first opportunity to vote, but because their eyes had been opened from the work in the street and their passion for living and for life and justice. And the church is so damn slow in moving. They're just like, you know, eat our dust, because we're out there and we're going to change the world. And all of us, we've all had that passion. We still do. They have it in a fresh way, and they have a global view of life in the world. And so I agree with Kathy's assessment, you know, that there's this different energy, different perspective, a powerful access to technology and information. So I found it interesting that you spoke about the prosperity theology of the Black church. And I, at least here in the Buffalo area, that may be true, but I think it's more that young Black people, and also white young adults, they're out of the church. Our church is not growing. It's not growing here. It's an aging community. And where it's growing is through a ever-increasing immigrant community here in Buffalo. I mean, from the Congo to Togo to Burma, Afghanistan, and it's exciting. And our some of the churches are saying, well, we need to evangelize in those communities. Well, folks are bringing their own religious experience with them from Togo, or if they're Karen from Thailand, they're not going to come into the Presbyterian church. They're just not. And we don't know how to, and I don't have any problems with that, because I see how they're engaged in community life here. And it's fantastic in the support of young adults by the older generation. There's a lot of conflict in this transition into this culture. But
I would say this, I do think there's a disconnect between the passion of young people for justice and the passion of the church for justice. We both have it, but they don't equate that with us. Just as you said, they equate us with being white evangelicals. They equate us with being only concerned about the issues of the church, but they don't know that we've been in this thing for a long time, and that's our fault. And what we have got to do is that we have got to enable them to see us as a resource in what they're doing. Our mistake is that we invite them to come to us, to join us, to be a part of who we are. Just as you said, ain't too many young Black kids out there gonna go and join a Presbyterian church, okay? You know, but I will say this: if you are engaged in the community, if your church has a presence in the community, they will unite with you. They might not join your church, but they will see you as an ally. The problem is that they don't see us as an ally. I worked in Durham for 20 years with young people. We had a summer camp that we work with teenagers from the whole community. These kids are engaged in spirituality. If you ask them, do you have a Bible app on your phone? Most of them do. They are interested in faith. They're just not interested in the church.
That's right.
And so we've got to let them know that we are engaged in the things that they are interested in. That means, of course, like I said, we got to think outside of the box. We got to do things they want to do, but we've got to talk more about justice. We've got to lay it on the line, because that's where we're going to get them, because these kids are, just as you said, they are more engaged in justice issues than they are in anything else. That is their whole passion right now. And this is my little catchphrase for churches. I say, and I close with this. What's the most controversial thing you can bring up in the life of a congregation, especially a Presbyterian church? You start talking about social justice. As soon as you say the word social justice together, people are going to tune you out. What's the one thing that young people are interested in? Social justice. So the thing that we are most intimidated by is the thing that will attract them.
Yeah, yeah.
It's sort of ironic that Dr. King, in a letter from a Birmingham City jail, mentions the fact that we're going to lose the young people if we don't deal with issues of justice. And it was prophetic. We see that's exactly what's happened in the world right now. I see there's a question out there by Herb Long. Herb had a question for us.
Yeah, I'm with the Lafayette Orinda Presbyterian Church. We're a large Presbyterian church located outside of San Francisco. In fact, we're the largest church in our presbytery. And our church is going through I guess I'll call it a journey at the moment on looking at what more can we do from an advocacy standpoint. We got big mission programs. We give a lot of money to local organizations internationally, but we're trying to see, take that step from, from charity to advocacy. Mm-hmm. And so that's ongoing. In fact, I know there's a couple of members of our church are on this call. But what's interesting is that I'm part of a Congo mission team. Mm-hmm. And we support the work of the Presbyterian Church in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Mm-hmm. And 4 years ago, we sent somebody, Sue Gibbons, came to your advocacy days in Washington, D.C. And Sue came back, and because we had been talking about advocacy, and so one thing I'm doing is making a shout out for those advocacy days. So she came back and said, all right, here's how you advocate. And she shared with us what we learned, what you do. And so over time, we've developed, we met with the staffs of our senators, our representatives, relationships with people in the State Department, with PCUSA representatives at the UN, and so on. And so that we advocate for the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's what we do, besides giving money for build Congo schools and so on. But you cannot, one thing I've learned, some people will say, well, what have you done? I mean, what winners do you have? Mm-hmm. And you can't judge it by that. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're not naive enough to think that, here we are, a group of people in California and talking to people in Washington and elsewhere, that we're going to have a big impact on, what happens in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. But, we're just a voice. We can be a voice of many. Mm-hmm. 2 months ago, there was a bipartisan letter came from the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to the State Department and to the Treasury Department, the Secretaries of State and Treasury, saying, hey, this is what the U.S. ought to be doing in the DRC. Mm-hmm. And they lay out a lot of stuff that we've been talking about. Well, that didn't happen because of Lafayette Orinda Presbyterian Congo mission team. But again, we were maybe a voice of a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And again, at the end of the day, you're just doing what the scripture said we ought to be doing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Jesus was a revolutionary. Yes. And so we've got to do that ourselves. So people shouldn't say, shouldn't get discouraged if they can't say, well, because we did this happened. Mm-hmm. Don't get caught up in that. Yeah.
And
just be a voice out there. And I appreciate you, Jim. One reason I'm sitting here talking to you, because you spoke last week at the Congo Mission Network Convention, annual commerce convention. So I appreciate you doing that. And so I was impressed with you. And so I said, I want to listen to this guy some more.
I appreciate
But
that.
just do it.
Yeah.
Don't get hung up that, oh, gee, this happened because we did this. You don't always know.
Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely
what
right.
the scripture says you ought to be doing.
You got to be doing. And we're planting seeds. And I tell people, oftentimes the issues you are working on won't be materialized in your lifetime. But you're part of that ongoing current, that stream that God has placed, that stream of justice. And I do, one of the things I think that's important for us to realize, through studying scripture, I'm really beginning to believe, and this is a little kind of spiritually arrogant, that God is calling a remnant of people. That even if you look at, most of Americans subscribe to the Christian faith, but not a lot of them want to talk about justice issues. And I think God is calling just a small group of folk to be that voice crying out in the wilderness. But we've got to be a consistent voice. We can't ever stop. We've got to keep saying, thus saith the Lord God. This is what God, because it will take effect. And God is doing some wonderful things. And again, just as you said, we can't try to, it's going to be hard to have measurable wins. I mean, it is so difficult. Rodney, when you asked me that question, man, I was like, we were there at the table, but it's just, we do it more so out of the belief that God will bring change.
Amen.
God will bring change.
Praise
Things are not going to stay the same. And they are, and life is getting better. And so we want to be a part of that, that arc of the moral universe that's reaching down towards the earth.
Thank you so much for that, Jimmie. I think there was a question from Suzanne, and I apologize. I think I attributed a comment to Suzanne from Pamela before, but Suzanne, did you want to say something? You had a question?
Yeah, actually, I did talk about the color of compromise, but there are two Suzannes on the call.
Oh, okay.
I'm the old lady from Virginia, and I had mentioned on there the team that I'm working with the Virginia Council of Churches, as well as the stuff I still do with the Synod, and I have my own congregation that I'm working on or work with as a CRE. So I'm not a pastor either by long training, just the Pathways course I took at Union. But my comment really is that I think that when you get a congregation that, like I have, which is, I'm retired and the vast majority of my congregation is older than I am. And, they don't want to come to worship because they're afraid of the virus. So I go in and tape the services and then send them out on computers so they can have them. I do know from a very early session meeting with them that I flat out told them that I had gotten in trouble when I was preaching at another church because I had gotten a little too obviously political for that congregation. And there were a lot of people that liked it, but there were also another great deal of people that did not and were quite vocal about it. And I thought then that if you're going to turn somebody off, if some word that you say triggers them to stop listening, they're not going to hear the wonderful things you have to say later on about, all that bad stuff I was talking about. You're not really doing that. What you're doing is, and, I decided with this group, since I don't know them that well, and I'd only been there 2 weeks when we shut down, is that I simply have to preach what the text says, but I can always bring into it those activities that Jesus is commanding us to do and highlight those and say, well, these can be in this area or these can be in that area. And I always find a way to bring in Micah 6:8, and say, this is what the Lord requires of us. And even though we can't work and earn our salvation, once we have that promise of salvation, this is what he expects of us out of gratitude. And that if we are truly faithful, then we will want to do that. And so that's kind of how I go along with it. And so far it's worked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And this one response I just have before I open up to Jimmie to jump in here as well is to say, there's no such thing as a non-political gospel. The gospel is inherently political. There's no such thing as a non-political Jesus. Jesus was political from start to finish. The idea of a Messiah is a king who will come to fix the world. In essence, if you're looking for a apolitical Jesus, you ain't looking for Jesus. And so one thing I would really want to emphasize is we don't have to be partisan. We don't have to be partisan political, but there's no way not to be political and proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. There's no way whatsoever. Jimmie, please.
No, I agree with you. And the only thing I would really just restating the same thing you just said, I do think we have to familiarize people with Jesus. I'm really concerned that the American Christian church, we know what our preacher believes. We know somewhat what our denomination believes. We know what we believe growing up, but do we really know Jesus? I spoke at the Montreat conference in this past January. I think it was the last big event that I did. There were 1,000 Presbyterian college students gathered together in one place. It was the most powerful experience I've had since I've been in this position. But the one thing I asked them to do, I said, just do one thing for me between this January and next January. Read the 4 Gospels. Just read the 4 Gospels, because I do think we have gotten so, it's an institution of the church has overwhelmed the biblical Christ. And I really struggle with, do people really know what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ as found in Scripture? And so one of the things, I really encourage Christians to do, let's engage with the Christ and see what Jesus actually taught us. And let's use that as a jumping off point, because again, it will diffuse some of that if people will engage with you in that way. But we've got to understand who Jesus was, because like you're saying, reading the Gospels changed my life. It just changed my whole perspective on everything, just those 4 books. So I agree, we've got to, and do it out of love again. That's my one thing. I think Jesus told us, love God, love your neighbor, love yourself. That's it. Do that, and everything else will follow.
Amen. We need to bring Jesus Christ back into Christianity. maybe if we introduce Christians to Jesus, we might find that Christians are changed.
Yeah, it's like when Cuba the indigenous community was overrun, and they were burning this native chief at the stake, and they told the priest to come over and convert him before we burn him at the stake. And the priest says, "Don't you want to go to heaven?" And he said, "Will there be Christians there?" He says, "Yes." "No, I don't want to go there."
Well, thank you. Thank you.
It takes me back, Rodney, to our first year of your center with Just Jesus. I think that we got to keep pounding that, don't we?
Yes, we do. You got to keep reminding people that that when you talk about justice, you're not talking about something that's political. It's not coming from an ideology from outside. It's coming from the Scriptures. I was on a radio program earlier today, and we were talking about this notion of politics and the Christian church and where the Christian church's position is. And one of the things that came up was, where does the Christian church stand on issues of social justice? And I said, if you read the gospel, if you read this text, you see where Jesus is. Jesus is feeding hungry people. Jesus is healing sick people without asking for extra money for it. Jesus is welcoming aliens and strangers. And Jesus is constantly involved in preaching a gospel of a changed kingdom in this world. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So if we begin to talk about this Jesus and help people to see this Jesus, then hopefully we'll be able to see that this Jesus was involved in world change. We need to bring that Jesus back to the church, because it's lost it, as you said, Jimmie. We've lost sight of who Jesus was. We've lost sight of the heart of this gospel message, the good news to the poor, the good news that's going to release captives and lift up those who are oppressed and heal those who are sick. We've lost sight of that, and to our great detriment. Jesus has become a commodity of a capitalist state that is intended to perpetuate us in a status quo that is unjust, as opposed to the Jesus who challenged it all. I'm meddling. Forgive me.
And let me just throw this. Go ahead. Who was about to say something? Was someone talking?
I was talking over Rodney. Just saying, my experience in the church, and I grew up in, I'm a PK from another, daughter of another generation of pastors, where there was, anyway, I'm not going to go into that, except to say that my experience in the church, for many folk, they are engaged in a civic religion.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be, want to make sure their babies are baptized, but we never see that young family again until the daughter wants to get married and the church is so beautiful. And it's what good people do. You join, or it has been, at least in this community, of you check out which are the kind of power churches, where the movers and shakers have landed, and they attend, and but it's really a civic religion. It's not transformational, and I don't want to be a part of that anymore. So I'm glad I'm retired, to be honest with you, because it's like I'm not going to continue to function in that way with an old system that's continuing to support this kind of for me, kind of weak milquetoast witness in the world.
Well, you need to come to Washington, D.C. and work with us.
I may just do that, my friend.
In the Zoom environment, we could really do some work together.
Sure. I'll call you, Jimmie. We'll get on this together.
Rodney, sometimes you need to get Elena to tell you the story of her upbringing and her minister father and the difference in that culture in there. And yeah. Bless you, Elena. Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Richard. So, and also there's, some of the work and what Kamala Harris talked about the role of the Black woman in maintaining the integrity of democracy in this country. I thought it was a fabulous statement that she made. And to talk in other areas about arenas about the white man's Christ, which is the word you use, Jimmie, and the Black man's Jesus. Mm-hmm. There's a different encounter with the gospel and the story of how the narrative of the Exodus and the liberation of the Exodus is to be all of our story. But the Black Americans in the church, not all, have claimed that, know that story, and have empowered them to do things that are unimaginably courageous and brave and prophetic. And I love what Barbara is doing in getting the stories of people who are suffering from no health insurance, who have poor housing, who don't have work, and hearing the voices of the people on the ground. It's brilliant work. It should be just standard kind of the work of the church to listen. And at least in this presbytery, we're not growing. The churches are not growing, but we still want to keep those doors open. We're not willing to merge with other congregations because, and older members, want to be buried from that church.
Yeah. And Ron, if I could add one more thing, I thought it was in my presentation, but it was not. We have our policy papers that are online that are available for any social justice issue that we've written over the last 50 years. And you can go online. It's PCUSA social witness policy statements. And you can download these as study guides. And when you made mention of civil religion, the last two that we did were on Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating that we have members who don't want to talk about politics in the church, but then they will get all upset with you if you don't have a flag in the sanctuary. So we have this we live in this parallel universe wherein we want to pick and choose what our issues are. But I would encourage those, for members especially who want to dig deep into an issue, a policy position of the church. I mean, the one, gun violence, gospel values, is probably one of our most popular ones, where especially when the shootings were going on in the schools and things along that line. So I just want to throw that plug out for as a resource.
Amen. Amen. Well, I want to say, right now, thank you for not just that resource, but thank you for being with us tonight, Jimmie.
Absolutely.
Thank you for this conversation tonight about what's going on in the Office of Public Witness. Thank you for literally giving us a sense of hope that we as the church are doing something in the midst of these perilous times. We are still bearing witness through the work that you all are doing in the Office of Public Witness in Washington, D.C. Before we go, is there anything you want to say just in conclusion before you say goodnight?
Yeah, we are a resource for you, for your congregation. If you need us in any way, if you want to make us aware of something that's going on in your community that you might want a larger profile for, or if you want us to do any type of work, especially, I strongly recommend my colleagues, anything international. Catherine can talk with you about it. Anything domestic, and Christian is our newest staff member, but she hit the ground running. And so we have a staff that's available to you, especially now in this digital environment. We are very easily to be a resource for you.
Well, thank you so much, Jimmie. And hopefully people will take advantage of you. I think we've got in the chat, we have ways to contact you. We'll definitely send out information as well. Let me also say, I hope that those of you who are here tonight will come back and join us again on December the 10th, where we're going to talk about these issues of Israel-Palestine and what we can do for peace in this arena, how we can continue to work and bear witness to peace, how we can begin to help truly understand that Palestinians are people too. Actually, the church is Palestinian in this region. So how do we begin to bear witness to a different way of relating in the midst of American Christian Zionism? How do we bear witness to a different way of relating to all the people, recognizing that everyone's made B'Tselem Elohim in the image of God and therefore has rights that deserve to be respected? So hope to see you at 7 p.m. on December the 10th for that conversation. Thank you again, Jimmie, for being with us tonight, and God bless you all. See you soon.
God bless you. Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Bye, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
I was waiting for y'all to sign me out, but I guess I'll be rude and leave.
I have to wait until it ends so I can download the recording.
Do you want me to end it now?
Yeah, that'll spit it out if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thanks.